state of removing the hazard, then you actually can make the situation much worse. Other things are splinting. Sometimes splinting can be really good. Sometimes splinting can be really bad. So if somebody has a really bad injury, you go up and you wrap it, you should always check the pulses after you wrap something. Because if you occlude an artery when you wrap something tight, then you're going to have cellular damage. So certain things like that in the moment when that adrenaline is pumping, you may do something right and it actually makes it worse. So that's why we want to, as long as they're alert and talking, that's the easiest thing to do. Just wait.
Keep them secured in the tree until the rescuers arrive. You know, so that way they can direct you on the hazard class. They might say to you, hey, listen, don't move them. I think we suspect a neck injury or something like that. So then they're gonna say, we're gonna, hey, hang them block. We're gonna come up and we're gonna stabilize and put them on a board, whatever.
And understand, so like LA County right now, LA County Fire is averaging 2 palm rescues a week right now. They are on average getting their palm rescues done in about 30 minutes. So not every department is going to take up to 3.5 hours. So it's just very variable. I've trained departments all across the nation on tree rescue for tree workers. We always start off with the first scenario. It takes like 2 hours to get the first scenario done. By the end of the class, they're getting it done in 45 minutes. So it's just a change of thought process. And because fire departments doesn't work on moving anchor systems that we have, trees move, and most fire departments are buildings, towers, water towers, those kind of things. So it's a very different environment for them. Fire rescue. You do your thing with the so that's where most likely they're going to try something when they're building bridges, get equipment in. They can't use your ladder. I mean, releasing 5-foot ladder, I'll just take the arms on it out, create it. The whole point of fire rescue, they always want a high chain. You get the anchor above them. We've taught some fire departments go up on spikes and actually do a low board anchor. They're kind of like lead climbing up. You lead climb them down. I don't teach a lot of spar rescue to tree workers anymore because 90% of spar rescues actually are spar recoveries, and we're higher risk to get somebody out of a spar, and we're causing a much higher likelihood of a secondary injury or secondary fatality. So I've got at least 50 spar rescue tree workers and the fire rescue that out of if you've never been in a spar, you've never done a spar rescue, you gotta have you know what you're doing. You're working in about this much space. There's different systems you can do, but you want to get that high point anchor off the down.
Some 100% body load on it there. You either need a moving rope system or a single line system. You can't just go up, flip a zigzag, or get kind of fully straight through this. We're going to have 100% load on it there. So we need to either make sure we're using an MRS or SRS system.
And by that 100% load, he's really talking about being able to lower them without what? If you're SRS, like a chicane, right? You don't climb on just the hitch, you add a rope wrench. So it has to be suitable for that. So that's why this works, but an SRS system would work there too. You just have to be able to obviously put enough purchase on that to pull that knot out.
So if you guys are training this, or you get in a situation with it, one big thing to keep in mind is where the rope angle is going. It can pull you away from the tree. So if he had, for example, that was our base anchor over there, it could pull us away far from the tree the second we untie it.
Sorry, so what you just said, does the same thing to apply if you use a rig?
No, pencil rig's rated for it.
Yeah.
You can go straight.
Pencil rig is a single line device.
Yep.
And then a pencil or an ID, not an ISC one's rated for 2-person load.
Okay.
So, but here you can see just a quick little pull down. I can start to manipulate and spin it here. You can see how loose that got by spinning it. I can untie him, now he's completely on me. But just keep in mind, if we did have a harder rope angle here, I could slide in here, and you can see how quick he can come down if it was a more drastic angle. I got you.
And also, when he was untying me, if you have a hard time pulling over because you're trying to get to that knot, what could you do also is get more in a direct hang and pull straight down, get friction off the tree, because that friction will fight you. If someone's heavier than you are, and you're trying to do that, you might need a little extra load by going straight down rather than against the tree. Just to get a little bit of that looseness on that knot, and then slide it to you. You know, practice that too if you're not sure, but like Lauren said earlier, if you take a full wrap on here before you do that, that'll create less force on the knot too, so you don't have to pull as much to loosen it. Now all he has to do is just lower me.
Big thing to keep in mind here as well too is if you're setting this up, planning for rescue, planning for the worst case scenario, is make sure that you have a clean line going up. If you had a bunch of suckers right here that is not going to get caught in, it's counterproductive setting this system up just so they can drop you down 2 feet. So we have a nice clean line here. We can just lower them straight to the ground. Travis can come in, help them, or I can walk over, get them down.
The other thing for this is make sure that when they hit their union up top, their time point, that's a good
Foot lock 4 times yesterday.
I footlocked more times yesterday than I'd done it in 8 years.
So we're coming back, he's unconscious there. What's the first thing we should do after we realize he's unconscious?
911.
We should call 911 and let him know what's going on, kind of at the same time or just before, evaluate the situation and make sure, first thing we should look for, there's no electrical hazards. Even though there weren't any initially on the job there, maybe there was a house drop near or something, we need to double check and make sure he didn't knock that on the ground, because even the 120 volt house drop, maybe they got a 3 amp, so they got a big welder or air compressor too, can cause enough step potential that if we step in, we could become another victim. So we want to make sure there's no electrical hazards first. We have 911 call. We want to let them know what's going on the scene there. I got a climber that's unconscious aloft. I need a high angle rescue. You need to tell them you need a high angle rescue because that's going to basically alert a different crew. They're going to, if you tell them I got someone hurt on a job site, they're going to send an ambulance. So if you can't get them or something happened to you, unfortunately you got injured too, the ambulance shows up, you're both shit out of luck. Now we're waiting for a high angle rescue. So you got to alert them to come. And you're going to step in and inspect everything. We don't know what happened, so maybe some rigging happened, maybe a piece of dead wood dislodged. We got to make sure that the trees fit, we're safe to proceed up the climb, make sure that nothing new, no hazards are there, and check his climbing system is going to be a big thing too. The simplest rescue is going to be just bringing him straight down on his line here. So I want to make sure from what I can tell on the ground, his tying point's still there, he still has his system. It looks like he has an ample amount of rope to get to the ground because he's on an SRS system here. If I was anything questionable, an MRS system maybe, I might put a stopper knot in it or bring a secondary lineup for him. So once I realize everything's all fine, I'm communicating this with 911, or I appointed my ground guy or someone else on the job site to talk to 911. I'll start proceeding up with the rescue there. If you're on the job site alone and you gotta call 911, I would just stick my phone up in my helmet, talk to them on speakerphone, even put it in your pocket. It doesn't matter if you can't hear them, you can just translate or relay to them everything that's going on. You got a little far away from me here.
The other thing is, you're assessing the victim, you want to make sure you stay out from underneath them. We don't really ever want to be underneath our victims in case they're bleeding or if you get a vomit, like that, you don't want to be in that area. The other thing is you want to make sure that your tying point is going to be good for a 2-person load, right? So if you're tying the same thing they're tied into, you got to make sure to assess that. One thing that they had going for them here is they already had an access line set. Most job sites don't have an access line for rescue and a climbing line. So that may be something you want to think about when you set your system up, of having that backup line already there. Otherwise, he's throw balling for this, and if anybody's trying to throw ball under pressure, usually you miss, or you hit people.
How many people are having access lines?
So Lawrence want to know how many people climb with an access line set for rescue? Something to think about.
I'm doing the hard trees.
When I know I'm going to need rescue.
A lot of trees like this, I might not set an access line, but a bigger tree, I think it makes perfect sense for 2 reasons. One, they want to get you anything, you can use that rope to haul stuff. They can haul it from the ground for you if you have 2 lines down there. They're going to come up and help you if you got a good teammate and it's the end of the day or they're done, they'll come up and help you, got a line set already. But in the worst case scenario, you need someone to come up and help you because you're hurt. An access line, what? Gives them a quick way to access a tree. What does that do for you? It means it won't take them as long to get up to help me, and I want that. So it's worth the extra effort. It's worth the extra rope, in my opinion, for that. Good.
Go get him.
Once you get up there,
He brought it with him on the way up.
I brought it up.
You didn't see that?
Let's miss that.
Well, once you get up, the first thing you're going to want to do is do a assessment on the hazard. So putting a hard connect to them is always when I make a hard connect to them, I like to go directly on my ring, on my bridge. If I were to
Hard?
come down hard. So you can see if he comes down hard here, how he's pulling on my system here.
Not pulling on his body or his harness is that way.
If I
More
were,
comfortable too.
if I were to put him on my bridge though, God, you're heavy.
You just call me fat.
I did. If something were to happen, I were to open a system here, you can see how it's going to start causing some gear issues here. It's going to pull me sideways and stuff, so I'm going to keep all my gear in line on him.
So something to think about with a hard point connection, it's a really good thing if your victim's conscious. If your victim's unconscious, you want to be very careful about this. In the event somebody regains consciousness in that state, they could have a head injury like that, they may become extremely combative. A combative person that you're attached to is going to be a really bad situation for you. So kind of you want to assess the situation, and again, if they're alert and conscious, nothing wrong with hard point attachment. But if they're unconscious, you may want to keep that eye away and just wrap your legs around them and do a soft connection that way, just like that, so you get a good mass transfer. That way, in the event something goes wrong, you can bail out, you can get away from them. Or they wake up, Mark becomes conscious, first thing he does is he grabs that akimbo and launches it. You may not want to be attacked to that. So that's why you guys assess your situation constantly.
Quickest way to assess a casualty, easy thing to remember, like childhood, ABC, airways, breathing, circulation. Run through those three things. It should encompass most things going on. Obviously, if we have trauma, we're going to see some visual signs of it, bones, blood, anything like that. Once you deem it that I should bring him down, from there you can proceed. There's a couple ways. Some guys like to go below them. Some guys like to wrap them. Wrap them. I want to so bad.
Defensive.
I'll like to put my feet out in front of me there. That way I can walk down the tree, kick off anything with him. There's a couple ways really depending on the tree and how many branches are around there to get him down. And then once you get him down, you'll have to decide which way to get him down.
And then just like a normal rescue. Here, we're just going to do off a single system. It's going to complicate things a little bit. If you guys are doing this at the first time, I highly encourage you to practice it low and slow. So even if you're doing it right off the ground, put a branch on the ground and stand on the branch on the ground.
Actually, that was beneficial before. And all I'm doing is I'm just connecting my system to him instead of just back to myself. I'm getting a little bit of purchase on here. I'm still attached to the tree, and I'll bring him over as best I can. But you can see I'm not really lifting him off the system. Why do you need to lift him? If you can release it, you don't have to. If you can release it, release it. But what I'm doing this for is because what if I can't manipulate that? In this scenario, I have to put my weight in here, and in order to lift him, I'm going to get above him a little bit. I'm going to pull you over. Let me get
One thing that's important here, if you're watching, Mark's using a zigzag and chain. He's actually using it as a moving rope configuration with two different people on it. That's why this chain's in place. Even though normally a zigzag would be a moving rope device, because there's two separate loads on that, and it's in that counterbalance rescue, that's why he's added the chain in there for the additional friction.
Don't do that. Now I can. So all I'm doing is, all I did was use my body weight, and if it's heavy, you can't manipulate it easy, grab their bridge and pull up as you go down. It's very easy to move a body that way. Even if they're heavier than you can do that very easily.
And like Mark said, if you can, just lower them into your system. That's always a great option, right? Get your system set, sit into it, come down a little bit and lower them into your system. Sometimes it's easier to try to pick them out of there. Use gravity to your advantage.
Now we're just both hanging in the system. And one big part,
Turn you off, man.
one big part of this, honestly, is making sure you don't have a lot of friction. So I really recommend a pulley in this scenario. So you don't have to worry about fighting friction to do that lift. It makes it a lot easier.
What's really interesting about the setup here is Mark actually could do two different things. He could stay lanyard into that branch and just lower Ryan down like a remote lower from there, or he can come down together with this one. It's kind of a nice option. If you've got a lot of branch structure to get through, you may want to come down together and stop, lanyard in, and lower the pressure down. You kind of work that system back and forth as you come down. kind of a nice
Shut that horn
technique.
off.
You also can stay on the akimbo there and have two systems run at the same time. Kind of manage that around devices and everything else.
One step I wouldn't bypass here, if it's me, I would put a connection between the two of us, because as you can see, if we're different in weights, look what's happening to me as I go down. I'm going down ahead of him, and I might leave him behind if he's lighter than me. So in this scenario, what I would do, I would get us into a position where I can put in some type of hard link, bridge to bridge, so that way I don't lose them under control here. This way, if they're heavier than you, or vice versa, you don't lose control, and you don't end up higher, lower. You're able to just kind of keep them close to you. And now, as I go down, this system will pull him with me, so I don't have to worry about whether we're the same weight or not. And I like this, like a scenario like this, because I have one hand free, where I can hold on and help him. I can direct around the tree, so I'm able to just repel with one hand rather than get friction like with, say, a muncher hitch below. But you can do that. But it's just two-handed that way, and I'll show you that in a second.
It's also nice.
Same thing. It's the same idea, nothing different. The only difference is I created a leg before I need it, so I can move through the tree. And if it's long.